Welcome to Autotechnick. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to not only remove, but reinstall a windshield in this 2001 M5. So the day has finally come. It is now time to get this windshield replaced in this car. This car spent the majority of its life in the Denver area, and for those of you that are familiar with that area know that sand damage is a real problem, not only on paint, but on glass. It's a really dry climate with a lot of wind, and there's a lot of fine sand on the roads, and it just tears the cars up from that. So that's really the reason why I'm replacing it. If you look carefully, you can just see it's littered with small pits, chips, and nicks. And anytime I get any sunlight, direct sunlight coming in on the glass, it just reflects on all that, and it's nearly impossible to see out. The windshield that I needed for my car was on back order from BMW for quite a while, so I've been waiting for several months in order to get this windshield replaced. So it's definitely one thing that I've been looking forward to. For those of you that have a keen eye, you'll notice that my windshield seal is already out, and that's because, like most E39s of the era, it was just dry rotted and cracking, and the rubber was chipping off when I got the car. So I just went ahead and pulled the seal in anticipation of replacing this glass, and has just left it like that as is until the glass came in. So I do have a brand new seal that I'll be installing with the windshield, but if you were to go ahead and replace or remove your windshield on this type of car, on this chassis specifically, you're going to basically sacrifice that seal. It's going to get destroyed on the way out, and you're going to need a new one. Now, I will say on most cars that have that rubber seal around the perimeter of the windshield, that's almost always sacrificed in order to get the glass out. Very, very rarely can I get a glass out without destroying the seal. They're usually cheap enough and need to be replaced that you cut it off, they cut the glass out, throw away the old seal, even if I'm using the same glass and putting it back in. What we're doing here is not specific to an E39 M5 or a 5 Series or a BMW. Any modern car that has a windshield that's glued in with urethane here, where you don't see the seal overlapping on the windshield, these processes and techniques will all be the same to go ahead and get them removed. Now, most of the time you'll have a glass guy replacing your windshield, so he'll cut out the old one and install the new one for you. But sometimes if you're doing a bigger project where you're removing the glass to paint the car, and then say you're going to reinstall that same glass, these are the techniques that I'll show you to go ahead and you can get that out, so that way you can continue on with your project. So let's take a minute and cover some of the tooling and supplies you'll need to go ahead and get this replacement done. Like I mentioned, the sacrificial seal, so I have my new seal here. I chose to go ahead and just order the BMW glue kit for this, and what this kit comes with is the glass activator here in this yellow tube. It used to come with this paint activator in the blue tube, but they've stopped including that into the kits. But I happen to have an old one left over from my BMW days, so I'll go ahead and use that. It has two tips. I only use this tip, and I'll show you right here because of that cutout. And when I go ahead and do the bead, we'll talk about why that's what I use, but I want the tall, skinny cutout, so the tip and the tube of glue. Now, this glue can be used cold or hot. If you go ahead and heat it up and apply it, it shortens your cure time down to 1 hour. So if you guys are like me doing it at home, it's no big deal because you can just use like a hair dryer or a heat gun, set this in the sun. There's a lot, I mean, really any way to get this tube warm, and you can apply it that way, or you can just apply it cold out of the tube. I've done it both ways, never had a problem. I do happen to have a spare tube of glue just on hand, just in case, but 9 times out of 10, you can get a whole windshield glued with one tube. If you're going through more than one tube, you probably use too much glue. It's okay, just grab your spare tube and go from there. I keep this windshield cutter on hand, but I don't use it very frequently. It's kind of cumbersome and hard to use. It's really if I have a really broken windshield and I can't use the wire or other techniques, I'll use this to slide up there in the corners and cut it. Definitely something you don't have to have. It's nice to have. Just something that I've had over the years. Now, there's a lot of different ways to cut the glass out. There's pneumatic cutters, there's suction cup cutters with a wire that goes around the windshield, and there's also, I've seen people use special blades on sawzalls, and it really depends on what you want to do in the car. Like on this particular car, the windshield dips down pretty deep underneath the hood, so it makes accessibility to get the windshield cut out pretty difficult. But honestly, the most universal, easiest, and cheapest way I've ever cut a windshield out is with wire. So this is specific wire for windshields, and it's basically a square wire, so it has some sharp edges, and it just takes 2 people. And I'll show you how I'll go ahead and feed that into the windshield. You normally hook it up to some handles, which I don't have, but I'll show you how I go ahead and use vice grips for that. And it just takes 2 guys to go ahead and, you know, pull that wire through the windshield, taking care not to cut the dash or anything else. And it's pretty simple. It's a lot easier than the other methods. Personally, I've never had good success with the pneumatic cutters. I feel that the cutters with the Sawzall blades are far too aggressive and just kind of bullish. And I have used the suction cup wire cutters on the glass, and those are pretty good, but those also break the windshield pretty frequently because they're putting all the stress onto the glass, and depending on how much curve you have in the glass, it weakens it, and it'll just cause the windshield to crack and shatter. So if you're trying to remove your windshield just to do repairs, rust repair, paint, bodywork, anything, and you want to reuse the glass, your best bet is to grab a buddy and cut it with wire, and that's what we're going to show you how to do today.
Now the components that you're going to have to take off in order to get access to cut out the windshield and reinstall the new one, those are going to change or vary from car to car just depending on your application. Different vehicles require different types of things to remove just on how they're designed. I have seen some very poorly installed windshields in my time, and I can tell you a lot of those that are installed very poorly, the person who installed it did not take the time to remove these components, tried to squeeze the windshield in with them still on, and is what you end up with is a bunch of water leaks, a bunch of wind leaks and noises, and you can usually see damage to those components as they try to fit the windshield in. For me, it's just a given. Take the things off, don't have them in your way, it's easier to work with, and your end result is much better.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Towards the end of my career when I was working at the dealerships, I usually did not tape off the car unless it was, say, when I was at Ferrari, if it was a carbon fiber body, or if I had a really tight tolerance, I'd cut it off. On my car, I have clear bra that wraps all the way down into this cavity here. So I went ahead and taped that off now, so that way I don't run any risk of damaging my clear bra. But you can see my windshield seal is already out, so I had access to 3 sides of the glass. But I removed all the trim and the wipers in here, so I have access to the bottom. Now on the inside, it's a bit situational. Not on every car I'll remove the A-pillars. On this particular car, it was just 1 screw and I can pop the A-pillar off, and then that gives quite a bit of freedom here where you don't have to worry about damaging anything because you have the actual body line right up here. So you're not trying to prevent that wire from going through and cutting that A-pillar trim, because that square wire will very, very quickly cut through the headliner, the dash, the A-pillar trim, these wires. Obviously, it's not feasible to pull the dash, so we're gonna have to work around that. And I don't do anything with the headliner because, again, we'll work around that. We'll work around the wires so we don't cut them. We'll be very careful not to cut the headliner, and you'll see us using probably a piece of cardboard as give us some extra insurance to put in between the wire and the dash. That does 2 things. That helps protect the dash, but it also keeps the wire pushed up close to the windshield, because the guy on the inside, he wants to hold that wire as close to this glass as possible, so that way we're just cutting the glue. If you start holding it down at an angle like this, that wire is going to want to go and dig into the dash or other parts of the car. So that cardboard or, piece of plastic, anything that you can stick in there is going to help hold it up tight. And it's a little bit awkward on positioning on holding it, but that's really the secret to it. Another tip is roll the windows down, because when you're setting the glass back in the car, you're going to want to reach in from the inside and support the glass. So the doors, you're going to want them shut so you have access up on the side of the car. Keep the windows down. While we're in here, I'll show you guys the glass, and you can see amongst all my fingerprints, but you can see just how bad this glass is and how desperately it needs to be replaced. I'm gonna go ahead and set the camera up, and I'm gonna show you how to feed the wire in to get it ready to be cut, and how to hook it up to the temporary handles I have with my vice grips, and then from there we're gonna go ahead and get this glass cut out.
I like to start with about an arm span lengths of wire, so roughly 6 feet. I do find that it's a lot easier to have the wire too long than too short when cutting out the windshield. To get the wire inserted into the glass so we can go ahead and cut it out, I'll take a pair of needle nose pliers and I gently push the wire through from the inside. Now I'm watching on the outside as I push the wire through the urethane to see when it emerges, and that way I don't push it into the body of the car. I can then reach my needle nose pliers in between the glass and the body of the car, and I pull the wire flush with the windshield and in a downward direction. That way I'm not trying to cut anything, I'm just feeding the wire through, and I have about a foot on one side and the remaining wire on the inside of the car. Since I don't have any wire handles, I just resort to using vice grips to secure the wire. Honestly, this method has worked so well for the years that I've never even bothered to buy handles. The way I make this work is I'll feed the wire up through the center of the vice grip, and then I wrap it around the jaws of the teeth a little bit, and I end up clipping it. That way I can go ahead and hold this in my hand equally, and I have the wire centered in my hand. It's a good, easy tool to use the pull. I already have them. No extra tools needed to buy. Works great every time. One thing I'd like to note here, if this is your first time using the square windshield wire, be very careful with it. It's sharp on all sides and the end. If you're not careful, even when you're clamping on these vice grips, or if you're using the proper handles, you could inadvertently scratch the paint, you could damage the interior, or you could end up cutting your own hands with it. So just be careful, be methodical, be cautious, and you shouldn't have any problems. But this stuff is a little deceiving on how much damage it can cause. When it comes to getting the windshield cut out of the car, it is absolutely a two-person job. Now, as tempting as it is, you don't need to seesaw the wire back and forth. The technique that I actually found that works the best is I have one person, usually the person on the inside of the car, holding the wire as close to the windshield as they can, and having them hold as much pressure on it as they can. And then I do most of the working on the outside of the car, where I'm trying to pull the wire, and as I'm trying to pull it through, I allow a little bit of it to come out lengthwise from the inside of the car to the outside. That motion will cause the wire to cut through the glue quite easily. Now, if you try to seesaw it back and forth, you end up overheating the wire. It'll start smoking out from where it's touching the glue, and the wire ends up breaking. As you can see here, we ended up breaking the wire. That's why it's nice to have an extra long piece. We just lifted the glass back up, stuck the wire back through, ran it back around to where we were, and continued cutting the windshield out. In addition to focusing on getting the windshield cut out, both people that are cutting the windshield out have their own roles, which are a little bit different. The person that's inside the car really has to be paying attention to be sure that we're not getting the wire into the dash or the headliner or any wires, and making sure that there's no damage endured there. And on the outside of the car, it's the same thing, except you're working around items like the hood and all the painted surfaces of the car. And like I mentioned earlier, this wire can do a lot of damage quickly, so you just really need to be careful, pay attention, go slow, communicate well with the person you have, and in the end, this whole process should take about 10 minutes. Now that we have the windshield removed from the car, it's time to address the glue that's left on the pinch weld. Now, the best method that I've found to removing this glue is with a flat razor blade held at a 45-degree angle to the pinch weld, a little bit of light pressure on the razor blade, a little bit of pulling on the glue as I'm cutting it off, and I find that it comes off quite quickly. Now, don't expect to get all the glue off. You're going to have a small line all the way around the perimeter where the glue will be. That's completely fine. The new urethane is going to stick to that, no problem. Once I have it cut off, I just go ahead and I clean over everything with a little bit of windshield cleaner, make sure all the dust and any contamination's clear from there, and that's all. The body of the car is prepped, ready to accept the new glass. The windshield prep is pretty straightforward. I like to get the windshield out, get it unpackaged, go through and get any tags or labels off, and get the remaining residue from those off as well. Then I like to go ahead and get our seal placed onto the windshield. Sometimes they're a really tight fit, so it's a little bit easier to put some glass cleaner on it and then get that seal slid on. Once our seal is installed onto the windshield, now's the time to get the glass cleaned on the inside. So a good wipe down with a microfiber and get all fingerprints, handprints, any kind of residue off the windshield, and get it nice, clean, ready to go. Once I have that done, I'll take our glass activator, I'll run that around the perimeter of the windshield, and now the windshield is prepped and ready to go. Over the years, I've taught and trained a lot of people on installing windshields, and there's one thing that they've all shared in common, and that was they're always most intimidated by gluing the windshields. Now, on this particular application, we are lucky because the windshield seal covers 3 sides of the windshield, and that seal basically gives us a guide of where to run the glue. You will notice that I'm holding the glue gun 90 degrees to the glass, And I'm doing this because it's more important to have a tall bead of glue than a thick bead of glue. That's why we're using that one specific tip on this gun. I want my glue bead to be about 3/4 of an inch tall and it's generally about 1/2 inch thick. Again, one tube of glue should get you through an entire windshield. If you have to stop and start, that's okay. If your glue gets wavy, again, that's fine. Start at the bottom of the windshield center, work your way around, and then you can just go ahead and overlap the glue by about 50% for an inch or two at the bottom, and then go ahead and squeeze those together and you'll have your full perimeter of the windshield glued together. Just take your time, go slowly, do a dry run before you start, and it's always, I promise, not as bad as it seems. It's pretty easy to get the glue laid onto the windshield. Before we place the windshield in the car, I'm going to go ahead and take some blue masking tape, placing it on the roof of the car and having it extend down to where the windshield's going to be. I'm just going to use 2 strips of this, and the purpose of this tape is to hold the windshield in place as the urethane dries. What we're trying to achieve is preventing the windshield from sliding down and sagging, so these 2 strips of tape is all we're going to need in order to hold this glass right where we want it until everything's cured up and dry. Now, since the back edge of the hood on the E39 overhangs the windshield so much, we're going to go ahead and shim the hood open just partially so that way we can make it easier to get the windshield carried over the car. Then once we have the windshield over the car, we're going to open the hood up, and that's going to pivot the hood out of the way and give us enough room to get the windshield set. So now you can see that we're just applying some suction cups to the glass that aid with holding it and getting it carried into position. Once we have our suction cups set, we'll carry the windshield over the car. Now this is where it's helpful to have a third person. We didn't, but you can see we had to go ahead and lift the hood up, which then gives us enough room to go ahead and set the windshield in place. Now I like to have the suction cups do as little work as possible, so I'll keep the windshield resting on the suction cups as long as possible, and then as we go to flip the windshield the other direction to set it in the car, I'll quickly take my free hand and loop it into the car on the back side of the windshield to go ahead and hold it, so that way the suction cups aren't carrying that much weight. Once we have the windshield set into the car, we're going to go ahead and make sure it's even from side to side based off of the windshield seal and the A-pillars. Once we're happy with where this windshield sits and the position of it, we're going to go ahead and lightly take the palm of our hands and tap it around. And the point of that is to try to be sure that we get the windshield seated in all the way and all of that glue compressed down. Once we're happy with the final position of the windshield, we'll take those pieces of tape we ran on the top, pull them down, run them tight on the windshield, remove our suction cups, and we're good to go. Once we finish setting the windshield in place, I like to go back and complete the reassembly of the outside of the car. So I like to get the cowling on, get all the wiper arms and blades on, microfilter boxes installed. These are all easy activities we can do while the urethane's still wet. However, I hold off on any interior reassembly until the urethane is completely dried. Now the reason behind this is because I've seen on countless occasions where the glue on the A-pillar squeezes inward on the car, and if you're to install the A-pillar trims, they actually get into the glue, and once that glue dries, that A-pillar trim is now glued to the car and it makes just a big mess of everything. Here you can see the glue on the inside of the car after we installed the windshield. Now we laid this glue on the windshield at about 3/4 of an inch tall, and now you can see it's only about 1/4 inch tall once it's pressed into place. One little quick tip for you, if you guys are new or this is your first time doing a windshield, keep your old windshield because it gives you a great path showing you where you're going to need to glue it. When I did this frequently at dealers, I knew where and how they needed to be glued on each car, but when you're doing a car for the first time, this is a great little tip just to be sure that you know you're going to glue it in the right area and not make any mistakes with your applications.
Alright guys, please let me know in the comments section below if you have any comments or questions on the video. I'd really appreciate it if you guys liked the video and subscribe to the channel. Take a peek at the channel. I have a lot more content, not just on E39s, but older BMWs and various projects. I appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you.